100 years ago, the sky still looked like a dream. People wanted to fly, to rise above the ground, to see the world not from below, but from a place where everything suddenly changes. But maybe the deeper dream was not only to be in the air, it was to see like a bird. Because from above, the familiar world stops looking familiar. A house becomes part of a larger pattern. A road turns into a line. A city begins to look like a living machine. And for the first time, a person can feel the scale of the place they live in. But for a long time, that view was almost out of reach for ordinary people. A camera could be lifted into the sky, but behind that shot there was usually a helicopter, a pilot, an operator, expensive equipment, planning, and a serious budget. That kind of image was used only when it was truly worth the cost, for movies, commercials, television, or large professional projects. Ordinary people could watch aerial shots on a screen. They could admire them. They could dream about them. But they could not simply take that point of view with them. And then one company changed the question, not how to put another flying machine into the air, but how to build a camera that could be trusted with the sky. This is Turning Point. The story of DJI is not just a story about drones. It is the story of how the aerial shot stopped being a closed professional language and slowly became part of everyday visual culture. But this shift did not begin with a beautiful image. It began with a problem. Because a drone by itself did not solve everything. A flying device can take off, move through the air, and respond to commands. But if the person controlling it is afraid of losing it, if the image shakes, if all their attention goes into simply keeping it in the air, then they are not really filming. They are just trying to survive the machine. And ordinary people did not need flight for the sake of flight. They needed a shot that felt smooth, stable, and clear. Not a random recording from the air, but an image that could feel like part of a film. That is where the real turning point begins. For a drone to become a camera, it first had to stop feeling frightening. It had to hold steady in the air, help the person behind the controller keep the image stable, and give them a way back if something went wrong. On paper, these can sound like simple features, but in reality, they changed the psychology of filming. When a person is afraid of the aircraft, the shot becomes secondary. They are not thinking about beauty, composition, or movement. They are thinking about wind, height, battery, signal, and the possibility of a mistake. But when the technology begins to help, the fear starts to move away. The person stops fighting the device, and for the first time, they begin to think like an operator. They are no longer just trying to keep the machine alive in the air. They begin to look through it. They begin to think about the frame, the movement, and the story they want to create. That was the key shift. The drone was no longer just a flying machine. It was starting to become a camera. Not a machine with a camera attached to it. A camera that could fly. That transition became especially visible with the Phantom. When DJI introduced the Phantom in 2013, the important part was not only that it was a quadcopter. The deeper point was that it was ready to fly out of the box. It had GPS assistance, a mount for a GoPro, and a return home function. In other words, it was not made only for people who loved the mechanics of flight. It was made for someone who wanted to lift a camera into the sky and actually get a result. And that mattered. Before this, There was an entire industry standing between a person and an aerial shot, a helicopter, a pilot, a crew, a budget, and careful planning. Now, between a person and the sky, there was a smaller device that promised to bring that view closer. Of course, this did not mean that professional aerial cinematography disappeared. Large productions still needed experience, teams, permissions, planning, and craft. Helicopters and professional crews did not simply vanish, but they lost their monopoly on the idea of the aerial shot. And that was historically important, because once a point of view becomes more accessible, it does not only change production, it changes what viewers begin to expect. At first, drone shots still felt almost magical. A slow flight over the ocean, a road disappearing into the mountains, a house revealed from above. Not long before, images like these belonged to the language of big cinema. Now, a person without a helicopter, without a film crew, and without a massive budget could begin to create them. But the story did not stop there. The next step was even more interesting. The camera in the sky was not only becoming more accessible, it was becoming more intelligent. With the Phantom 4, that idea became much clearer. The drone did not only respond to commands, it could sense obstacles, track a subject, and help the person behind the controller shape the movement of the shot. Again, the important thing was not the list of features. The important thing was that the machine was taking away part of the anxiety. The person no longer had to hold everything in their head at once. They could think less about controlling the machine and more about telling the story. That is the moment when technology begins to disappear behind the image. The viewer does not see the motors, the sensors, or the stabilization system. They see a smooth flight, and the creator feels that the sky is no longer so distant. Then came another important step. The Mavic Pro made aerial filming feel more personal and more portable. A foldable body, a stabilized 4K camera, and the ability to carry the drone with you changed the feeling of the device itself. It no longer felt like a large, separate piece of equipment that had to be prepared for a special shoot. It became something you could put in a backpack. And that made the main shift even stronger. The sky was not only becoming more accessible, it was becoming portable. A person could now take that point of view with them, not only for a major project, but for a moment they wanted to see differently. That is how the aerial shot began to move beyond cinema and advertising. It appeared in YouTube videos, travel films, real estate, weddings, and personal stories. But the specific categories are not the most important part. The important part is that viewers slowly got used to a new visual language. Before, a shot from above immediately said, "There is a big budget here." Later, it began to say something else. "Here is a point of view that used to be out of reach." And then the most important thing happened. We stopped being surprised. Today, a camera can fly over water, a city, or a road, and the viewer accepts it as a normal part of the video. But that is exactly what shows the strength of the change. Technology first feels like a miracle. Then it becomes a tool. And then it becomes normal. That is when it truly changes the world. This shift did not only change how people filmed, it changed how people remembered places. In the past, aerial shots usually showed something large, a city, a landscape, a structure, an event. But when that point of view came closer, it also began to show personal life. It could show a home, a road, or a place someone wanted to remember. Not as small, separate details, but as part of a larger picture. And an ordinary moment suddenly gained scale. Not because it became important to the whole world, but because the person could finally see it differently. For the first time, that ordinary moment could be seen from above, from a little distance, as part of something larger. And maybe that is why this story feels emotional. Because a powerful camera always gives people more than an image. A photo camera preserved faces and moments. A motion picture camera gave those moments movement. A phone made filming part of everyday life. GoPro placed the camera inside the action, and DJI lifted the point of view above the person. Each time, the device changed. But something deeper changed too. The place from which a person could look at life. In that sense, DJI is not just a company that made a popular drone. It is part of a much longer story about human vision. First, people looked at the world from the ground. Then they learned to preserve what they saw. Then they learned to capture movement. Then the camera moved into the pocket. Then it entered the action. Then it rose into the sky. And each time, the boundary moved. Today, a drone can seem like just another filming tool, another device in a world already full of cameras. But if you look deeper, the main change was not in the device itself. The main change was access. The sky used to be an expensive point of view. Then it became a point of view people could carry with them. A person did not get wings, but one day they lifted a camera into the air and saw their life from a side that once felt unreachable, from above, like a bird. And that was the real turning point.